All right, we'll get started so that we're not starting 5 minutes late as webinars so often do. So thank you everyone for showing up tonight. My name is Cassie. I'm a staff member with the Sierra Club Wisconsin chapter. I'm really thankful that you're able to join us tonight to learn about the state budget in Wisconsin and how it touches different environmental issues. We will go through some welcome notes, which is the section we're in right now. I'll give a brief overview of the state budget, what it is and how it works. So if you are new to advocating on the state budget or aren't sure totally what it's all about, you can learn some of that tonight. And then we have speakers that will walk us through some of the key issues that we're watching in the state budget that we think that we can still see some level of victory on. The door hasn't quite closed on all of these items yet. And in some cases, we even have good news. So we'll walk through some key issue areas in the budget we're watching. And then throughout, we'll have some ways that you can take action to influence the state budget and contact both the budget drafting legislators and your personal legislator. So as people keep trickling in, we've got almost 30 people on the call right now. So if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, just so we know who's here, where you're calling in from, if you want to share your name, your location, what brought you here today, so why are you interested in this topic, and then for a bit of flavor, what's your favorite vegetable? I know many of us are watching our gardens, waiting until there's something that we can eat that's not just a hearty green. So I want to hear what your favorite vegetable is that you're looking forward to, whether you're growing it or you just like how it tastes better in the summer. I think many of us are very familiar with Zoom at this point, but just in case this somehow is your first Zoom, this screen shows where the different buttons are for you. So there's an option to mute and unmute. We ask that you keep yourself muted while you're not speaking so we don't have background noise and you can hear each of the speakers well. You can turn your camera on and off. You can click number 3 on this, the circle that says participants. And if you click that, you're able to change your name. So it'll open the list of everybody who's here. You can click on yourself and rename yourself. So if you're on the call as iPhone number 7, you can rename yourself as what your real name is so that we know who's here. And then please do feel free to use the chat function. We're covering a lot of ground tonight, so hold questions until the end and we'll have a little bit of time at the end to answer them. If we don't get to answering every question on the call, I'll send some email follow-ups. We're also going to send the slides and a recording of this. So you should have, and the links that we mentioned to take action, all of that will be sent your way afterward. If not tonight, then tomorrow. So hold your questions to the end. We'll get through what we can. And then tonight's speakers, we have a really great list of people who give so much heart and soul to influencing environmental policy in the state. Tracy is with the water team and our legislative committee. Emily is with our transportation team. Amy is with our wildlife team and legislative committee. Charlie is a guest here with Gathering Waters, and Clint is with the Conservation Fund. And then I mentioned I'm with Sierra Club as a staff member. So here's our rapid fire state budget overview. Just some quick facts about the budget that I find interesting as background. This is Wisconsin's only must-pass bill. So even though we have a legislature and a governor that don't see eye to eye, this is something that has to pass some way, shape, or form. So this is Wisconsin's only must-pass bill. July 1st is the legal deadline for it to be passed and effective. The past several years, it has been later than that. So the budget that we currently have stays in place until the new budget is signed and put into effect. Our budget cycle is biennial, so it's a 2-year process. So you'll hear me talk about odd years and even years, this year being an odd year, 2024 being an even year. So when we're looking at a time, like a time frame of what the budget process looks like, that's what that means with the odd and even years. And then our state budget is around $60 billion per year. And I want to put that in perspective because you'll hear us talk about some of the programs that we're asking for in the $1 million range, couple $1 million range. Very rarely in the $1 billion range. And so that puts into perspective how much can be done with even simple investments that haven't been made over the past several years. So the things that we're asking for are not, 20% of the budget. They're often small investments that can go a really, really long way. So this is our budget timeline in a very condensed version. So in the fall to winter of even years, so 2024, different government agencies put in their budget requests to the Department of Administration. So they look at what they believe their needs are and their priorities are, and put that together to propose what they think they need. In late winter, early spring, that's when the governor comes out with his proposed budget. So we saw that come out with a lot of really strong programs. He'll do a state budget address. Often will also do his own listening sessions or feedback sessions. And then in spring to summer, so right around where we're at now is when the Joint Finance Committee starts to work on this. There were 4 formal public hearings. A lot of legislators have held their own town halls in addition to that. There are public comment websites that you can use in different ways that you can contact. And so the Joint Finance Committee is our budget committee that are workshopping the budget. So a trend that they've been following the last several years is to ignore completely the governor's proposed budget and start at status quo, so the budget that we have had in place. You'll hear on this call, though, that there have been some differences this budget cycle, perhaps because we have new maps. So there's been a little bit more discussion on some of the issues that we're watching closely. So that star is where we are right now. So the Joint Finance Committee is still workshopping. After they're done with it, it will go to the full legislature. It has to pass both the House and the Senate, and then be combined so that the bill language from both of those is the same. It'll go to the governor's desk, and he has line item veto power. So he can take out characters, words, a full line, but he cannot add anything in. He can also veto the budget in full or pass it as written. But most often we see some line item vetoes. So that's where we're at in the process. If you remember my prior slide, the deadline on this is supposed to be July 1st. And we are still with the Joint Finance Committee working on their version of things. So we've got a bit of a ways to go. But that's where we're at in the process. And then this year being an unusual year, there are a couple other things that are happening in parallel to the budget process, but just outside of it that relate to budget issues. And Charlie will talk about one of those examples later on. So who is on the budget committee? This is the map of the Joint Finance Committee. There are 16 legislators, 12 of them are Republicans and 4 of them are Democrats. You can see what areas of the state they represent. So very heavy concentration in southeastern Wisconsin, Some legislators from Milwaukee, but also the suburbs outside of Milwaukee. So this is where these legislators are coming from. A couple of things this year. The governor's proposed budget was really, really strong. There were a lot of programs in it that we were excited about. We called it one of the best executive budget proposals we've ever seen in the state of Wisconsin. There were some really great ideas in there from the governor's administration. As I mentioned, the legislature chose to throw out, I think, 600 plus of those ideas and sort of start from status quo. But there has been some level of debate, and some of our key issues are still in motion. Those are the issues that we're focusing in on today. So there's way more in the state budget that we care about than what we're going to cover today. But today we're going to talk about some things that we have seen momentum on, or that we think we can still see momentum on. And then we've seen, this year and in past budget cycles, thousands of people participate in this. The state budget hits way more topics than just environmental issues. So I have these maps or these graphs from Wisconsin Eye on the slide here. You can see that this light pinkish purple color is education, and the salmon-y color is healthcare. Environment is the navy blue color. So you will see that there were quite a few people who talked about environment specifically, but the budget hits on many things that we care about. And of course, all of this is intertwined. So I don't know how Wisconsin Eye split up some of their categories, because of course, clean water, for example, is an environmental issue, but is absolutely a health issue as well. So a lot of these things cross over. And then transportation has its own sort of gray, brown, purple color on this. And we look at transportation as an environmental issue as well. So that's a sense of sort of where people are coming from in the budget process at the public hearings. I'll send out the slides so that you have these links, but I have found it somewhat difficult to follow along with the state budget process. So I put these links all in one place for you so that you can keep following it after this webinar. If you want to watch the Joint Finance Committee and other legislative discussions related to the budget, Wisconsin Eye has video coverage that they're posting. You can watch the meetings streaming live, or you can make a free account and watch recordings from past sessions. I linked the comment page. You can still submit comments to members of the budget committee. And then the Department of Administration page is where all the documents go. So you can view the governor's budget there, the agency requests there, and then eventually, once the budget is passed, you can view it there as well. So that's some background information on the state budget and sort of where we're at in the process. There are a couple of issues that we are watching closely, that we are excited about and hope that continue to move forward in the budget process. We're going to start with a bright spot. I'm going to hand it over to Tracy to talk about clean water.
Thanks, Cassie. Hi, everybody. I am Tracy Stetter, she, her pronouns. I live in Milwaukee, and I'm a volunteer with the Sierra Club's water team. I also serve on the executive committee, and I volunteer with the National Factory Farm sub-team. I want to talk to you today about 3 of our legislative priorities for clean water in Wisconsin. They fall into 3 categories: PFAS, which are also known as forever chemicals; lead pipes, which of course lead to water with lead inside of it, not good; and nitrates from agribusinesses like factory farms. I'll be giving you a brief summary about why these 3 items are a priority, and then sharing what our ask is of legislators. And yes, I do have a little bit of good news at the end of my presentation. Okay, the problem with PFAS, quick summary, they increase the risk for testicular and kidney cancer. They can elevate cholesterol levels, cause liver damage, reduce infant birth weights, and raise the likelihood of high blood pressure in pregnant women. 92 water systems in the state are struggling to comply with new federal limits on mitigating PFAS pollution. And at the same time, a third of Wisconsinites have private wells that lack protections against PFAS pollution. We are supporting several and ask you to support several proposals in Governor Evers' budget that set aside about $145 million to monitor and remediate PFAS pollution and improve water quality standards that protect human health. I didn't go into excruciating detail here. I'm hoping that there will be some additional details in one of the handouts or a link that is accompanying this presentation. Our second priority has to do with lead pipes. Many young children, whether in childcare centers or in their own homes, are unknowingly exposed to lead contaminated water. Lead poisoning causes irreversible brain damage and developmental delays. Thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, work has already begun in the state to replace lead service lines. But more money is needed to fulfill a 10-year mandate to replace all lead lines, and therefore we need more money. So our asks: support several proposals in Governor Evers' budget that set aside more than $200 million to replace lead service lines and widen access to safe drinking water. Lastly, our third priority is nitrates. Nitrates are a byproduct of agriculture and liquid manure. Millions of gallons of liquid manure produced from factory farms are spread annually across fields. Liquid manure is loaded with harmful pathogens, bacteria, and chemicals. And those pollutants can run off into lakes and streams, killing fish and causing serious health risks to humans. They can also seep into groundwater where they get into private drinking water wells. Nitrate contamination in particular has been linked to cancer, birth defects, and even infant death. The problem disproportionately affects the 1/3 of Wisconsinites who rely on private wells, with an estimated 42,000 private wells in the state exceeding the health standard for nitrates. So our asks: we ask you to support Governor Evers' budget to set aside about $45 million to improve testing and monitoring of nitrates, fund infrastructure projects to reduce non-point source pollution, increase factory farm permitting fees, and expand grant funding for new drinking water wells. Okay, now the good news. So we know sometimes when it comes to water issues in our state, they can seem insurmountable. But last week, the Joint Finance Committee voted 16-0, a rare showing of bipartisan support, to increase the revenue bonding authority of the Safe Drinking Water Loan Program and the Clean Water Fund Program by $732 million. I know you saw that highlighted before I even said it. That's a lot of money, and we're super excited about it. So when you take action, please send a thank you or call members of the Joint Finance Committee. Whatever you do, write or call them and thank them for funding the clean water programs. And don't forget also to participate in Call-in Day tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I put the link to the call-in day information in the chat so that you can access that. Again, it'll be sent out after this, so do not worry if you miss it and want to focus on this and come back to that document later. Next, I'm going to hand it off to Emily to talk about transportation.
Hello. Investing in public transportation is super important to Wisconsin's future. Robust transit systems improve the livelihood of people in the state. It connects people to jobs, schools, medical care, and other essential services, especially those who cannot drive due to age, income, disability, or choice. For many Wisconsinites, public transit is not a convenience, it's a lifeline. Prioritizing transportation options in the state budget strengthens our economy by expanding access to employment and reducing the financial burden of car ownership. It also supports local businesses, reduces traffic congestion, and enhances mobility in both urban and rural communities. Reliable transit builds stronger, more connected communities. Public transit is also one of the most powerful tools we have to combat climate change. By reducing the number of single occupancy vehicles on the road, we lower greenhouse gas emissions, improve air quality, and lessen our dependence on fossil fuels. Expanding transit option also encourages walkable, sustainable development and helps preserve Wisconsin's natural resources for the future generations. We need a state budget that puts funding towards repairing existing local roads and bridges and creating new and improved opportunities for public, alternative, and specialized transportation. A few programs that the transportation team has been advocating for in the budget for years include restoring the Transportation Alternatives Program to improve walking and biking infrastructure, increasing paratransit and specialized transit to better support the elderly and people with disabilities across the state, improving local road infrastructure to make roads safer for drivers and pedestrians alike, and increasing transit operating funds to better support public transit options across the state. In the past several budgets, very small increases to transit operating funds, paratransit, and specialized transit has passed. We are hopeful that they can happen again in this budget. It's not nearly enough to meet the critical needs in our state, but it's a step in the right direction that we will continue to fight for. We ask that the taxpayer dollars are responsibly used by supporting cost-effective local transportation options and repairing existing infrastructure instead of building new mega projects. Specifically, we hope to see at least a 4% annual increase to transit operating funds, as well as increases to other forms of transit like paratransit, specialized transit, and tribal transportation programs. We also hope that multimodal local projects have the opportunity to receive grant funding like they have in the past, that local road aids are increased, and that the Transportation Alternatives Program is restored. You can help by signing a petition and committing to calling in on our call-in day tomorrow. Thank you very much for letting me speak with you.
Thank you, Emily. Next, we will hear from Amy about some things happening with wildlife programs.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Amy Mueller, she, her pronouns, and I'm coming to you from Waukesha County, just south of Oconomowoc. And on our wildlife team, we have been really championing two things that the governor proposed. And it was a relatively small investment, as Cassie said before, two things combined for 7.25 million. So small investment that would have a big impact. And really, our focus is thinking about the win-win, not only the wildlife, but also our state farmers who right now are getting a lot of pressure and squeeze between federal programs hung up or ended altogether, as well as inflation and possibly, the tariffs and all of the things going on. So with that, I'm going to share with you just the two things that we were so excited about in the governor's budget. And we can go into those here quick. If you want to just, there we go. Perfect. So the first one is supporting farmers who have crop damage from sandhill cranes. And so Governor Evers proposed 3.75 million to help essentially address this with a long-term fix. So the idea is right now there's no funding available. So this would provide an absolute solution to our issue. It's a proactive program, essentially coats the seeds with a bitter tasting coating so the cranes don't eat it. Right now, putting out the corn kernels in the very early spring is when cranes like to eat them. And so they can go down the row and they can cause some damage for farmers, primarily in central Wisconsin. One solution that gets a lot of PR and a lot of news coverage is we will just solve this by having a recreational hunt. And so for what it's worth, I'd just like to remind that a recreational fall hunt that is sustainable would actually not have any bearing on the spring crop damage. So that's just an important point. And so this isn't a problem we're going to shoot our way out of. And there's no evidence that a hunt would actually save not one bit of scientific evidence that would save crop damage. So the idea is to get this funding and to make some real long-term adjustments to coexist with the cranes in our state. So that's one thing that we are hopeful will still come through in one way or another through this budget cycle. And then the other is something that we have been asking for on behalf of the Sierra Club for a number of years, and we're delighted to see it in the governor's proposal, was looking for an investment, and he actually came back with 3.5 million, which was wonderful, that would help with wolf monitoring in our state and also helping farmers who are experiencing wolf conflict. And typically this gets I want to say a little bit overblown in terms of the impact. However, there are about 20 farms that have what we characterize as chronic issues. And this would allow for things to be implemented on those sites that would eventually effectively alleviate the problem. So predator-proof fencing has been proven to be incredibly effective, not only in Wisconsin, but in our neighboring states. And so that's what we'd like to see invested in here. And then furthermore, again, this is another area where in the past, the state and DNR has sort of piecemealed different federal grants together to try to do some of this work on several sites. And in speaking with the DNR recently, they believe that that funding is no longer available. So it's even more important than ever that our state fund this important work, just as many other states have. This is part, again, of a long-term coexistence with our wildlife and finding a win-win for our farmers. So hopefully we can embrace this, and it would be lovely to see this supported as well. In the end, these two things, small investment. So if these speak to you, hope that you can participate in our call-in effort and talk to your legislators that bring this up to the Joint Finance Committee. I can tell you that I went to Milwaukee to speak to them and brought up these 2 points in waiting about 8 hours in Milwaukee at Safe Air Park. So they have heard of this, and it's important for them to continue to hear. And if you can be the voice for the voiceless, it's really important. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. Next, we're going to shift into talking about land stewardship. I'm going to pass to Clint Miller with the Conservation Fund to give an example of how our stewardship program has had challenges in the past and been successful. And then we'll hear a little bit more from Charlie about where the stewardship fund is at in the process.
Hey, thanks, Cassie. Just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. I just want to make sure I'm on. So my name is Clint Miller. I'm the regional director for the Conservation Fund, which is a national nonprofit with a dual mission of land protection and natural resource-based economic development. And in Wisconsin, along with our partners, we've preserved over 185,000 acres over the last 40 years. That's about 3 times the size of the city of Madison, which is my hometown. Our projects range from helping acquire land for the Ice Age National Scenic Trail to working with the Milwaukee River watershed to slow infiltration of water into the Milwaukee metropolitan sewage system, and then finally to protect large tracts of working forests in the Northland. And stewardship funds, the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program, which Charlie's going to talk a little bit more about specifically, our funds are critical to all the work that we've done. So I've been asked to talk about a very specific project that hit the news last year and where the role of the stewardship funds were critical. So the Pelican River Forest is a tract of land, and there's a map that's up on the screen right now that without context is a little bit difficult to understand, but it's north of the city of Antigo, south of Eagle River, and just to the east of Rhinelander. It's 70,000 acres of working forest that is essentially the southeastern corner of Oneida County. It's a working forest. The headwaters of both the Wisconsin and the Wolf rivers are here. It has wolves, bear, dozens of species of migratory birds, and even the American marten. The property contains more than 30,000 acres of wetlands that provide water quality benefits, and under our current management removes 19 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent annually, which is like removing 4 million passenger cars off the roads from the roads in one single year. Wood harvested from this property supports nearly 700 jobs in the forestry sector, which is crucial to the Northland. And we provide recreational access for hiking, hunting, cross-country skiing, and an open road network of more than 70 miles that also contains ATV and snowmobile trails. So it's a critical piece of that recreational economy and that tourism economy of the Northland. Now, I need to give you a little bit of context about working forests and understand so that you can understand the project and a little bit about the role of the stewardship funds. So northern Wisconsin forests are mostly privately owned, even though most of us probably recreate on public lands. A lot of this area is still privately owned, and a lot of those private ownerships, that bulk of the wood that comes from there drives our vital forest economy. They also provide a critical climate benefits, as I just described, protect water quality, and provide key habitat to rare species, and important access to outdoor recreation. For more than 100 years, much of the forest land in this part of the state and in the country was owned in large part by vertically integrated companies. These are companies that owned the land, they owned the mills, and they had logging and trucking companies on their payrolls. They had a vested interest in keeping those all those pieces running together and sustainably. Over time, this system is unraveled, and now these large industrial forests, which we call industrial forests, have been sold and chopped up into smaller and smaller pieces. And most of them are now owned by timber investment management organizations, or TIMOs for short. These can be specialty investment subsidiaries of big insurance companies, private investors, and even endowment funds, like retirement funds. So in the good old days, these vertically integrated timber companies had vested interest in the sustainability of their forest management and keeping forests intact and productive. In contrast, TIMOs are driven by short-term gain to maximize return for their investors. This shorter investment horizon has resulted in poor forest management and divestment into smaller and smaller tracts of land. The result, a less sustainable forest economy, poor management practices, and in many cases, a reduced or eliminated recreational access. So the Wisconsin DNR and conservation community have recognized this change and has stepped in to secure conservation easements on these large remaining working lands. A conservation easement, for those who don't know, is a permanent legal restriction on the property that prohibits activities detrimental to the conservation values, but allows activities that enhance or preserve those values. The landowner can still sell can sell a conservation easement because it has value. Essentially, you're giving away, you're selling some of these rights or the ability to do things on your land. They have to live with those restrictions, and then when they're ready to sell or transfer that land, they can do that, and those easements stays with the land forever. Now, working forest conservation easements are a terrific way at a low cost to preserve intact forests, make sure they're well managed, and permanently secure public access, because conservation easements are generally only a fraction of the value of a piece of property. So in Wisconsin, the stewardship funds have been used to purchase conservation easements successfully for decades. For an owner with short-term investment goals, selling a conservation easement is a good business decision. It's an immediate return on that investment. And I bring all this up because it's really important to understand that this is business for people who own these lands. So the conservation fund stepped in and purchased the Pelican River Forest from a TIMO, sold conservation easements to the DNR, and will eventually sell the underlying fee or that property back into the private marketplace to continue this cycle. But those easements will continue to require public access, sustainable forestry practices, and the protection of wetlands and waterways. Now, Cassie mentioned earlier the small investments that go a long way. Well, the leverage of other funds is one of the hallmarks of the Knowles-Nelson Stewardship Program. So for the Pelican River Forest Project, the plan was to use the federal Forest Legacy Program to cover up to 75% of the cost of acquiring this conservation easement. The federal dollars required 25% match, which is where the Knowles-Nelson Stewardship Funds come in. In our case, the legislature 2 years ago blocked the use of the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Funds, which meant the DNR could only had enough funds to cover the 75% of the value of the easement. As an NGO whose goal is to, or non-governmental organization whose goal is to protect large tracts of forest access in the forest across the U.S., we made a calculated business decision to accept that lower payment. However, there are hundreds of thousands of acres of unprotected forest land remaining in Wisconsin, where private landowners, including TMOs, are unable to make that kind of decision. Without the stewardship funds for these types of projects, we are leaving federal money on the table. We're shortchanging Wisconsin forest landowners from a program they can benefit from that has solid financial benefits. We're risking the loss of biodiversity, water quality, recreational opportunities, and securing a sustainable forest economy. So unless there are questions, and you can put those in the chat, I'll turn it over to Charlie Carlin from Gathering Waters to talk more about the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Programs and specific actions you can take to help. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Clint. Hey, folks. Good evening. My name is Charlie Carlin. I work with Gathering Waters. We function as Wisconsin's Alliance for Land Trusts. So we represent groups like the Conservation Funds, like the Nature Conservancy, and a whole lot of local nonprofit conservation organizations around Wisconsin that are really all dedicated to conserving land. It's also really our privilege to coordinate what we call Team Knowles Nelson, which many of y'all are a part of. Team Knowles Nelson is a coalition of, I think we're up to almost 80 different organizations and thousands of individuals around Wisconsin who are really all committed to making sure that the stewardship program continues to work for Wisconsin and allows us to keep doing all of this really good work like Clint described. I'm actually phoning in tonight also from the Northwoods, and my place is on the edge of Langlade County Forest, and Clint's project helped connect Langlade County Forest, connects to Oneida County Forest, connects to the Pelican River Forest, which connects up to the national forest land. And so these projects that can stitch together wild landscapes and really provide that habitat connectivity to allow our large carnivores and our game species to move are just so vital. So it was super fun to work on Pelican River Forest with Clint. So let's take a step back here and just talk a little bit about what Knowles Nelson does. So the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program, it's named really in honor of Wisconsin's bipartisan conservation heritage. So Warren Knowles was a Republican governor, Gaylord Nelson, a Democrat, who founded Earth Day. Both of them had very strong conservation ties, and the program is really designed or named to kind of honor the fact that both Republicans and Democrats really have a common conservation heritage and conservation commitments. Knowles Nelson has been going strong for about 35 years now. It was first passed in 1989, went into effect in 1990. This was under a democratically controlled legislature with Republican Tommy Thompson as governor. One of Tommy's favorite things to say is that he protected more land in Wisconsin than any other governor. And this is stuff that he'll say to this day. So the real bipartisan commitment to taking care of our land and water, it's not it's not distant history, even if our politics are so difficult and so contentious right now. So what does Knowles Nelson help us do? It helps us do those really big land acquisition projects like the Pelican River Forest. Knowles Nelson funds also help our local governments and local land trusts protect all the places close to home. So your neighborhood park, your bike trails, the boat launches that help you launch your kayak in the summer, or your fishing piers. beaches where you may go hang out on our lakes and rivers. All of those things are the kinds of things that Knowles Nelson will fund. What Cassie has put up here for a slide is this really neat interactive map where you can go and check out what Knowles Nelson does kind of close to your home or anywhere else in the state. The link to get here is just map.knowlesnelson.org. And you can go in and filter the map by Senate district, by Assembly district, or by county, or you can just go in and browse around. What this is going to show you is that to date, we've got more than 10,000 completed Knowles Nelson projects on the ground. The fact that that picture of the state of Wisconsin is covered in Knowles Nelson pins is testament to the fact that every single community benefits from the stewardship program. A few years ago, we did a little analysis and found that more than 90% of Wisconsin households are within a mile of a Knowles Nelson stewardship project. And that's really kind of speaks to the breadth of the work that it does. So if you're a hunter or an angler and you love getting out in wild places, Knowles Nelson helps secure those lands. If you ride your bike to work, like I live down in Madison, I ride on the Cap City Trail every day. That is funded with Knowles Nelson stewardship dollars. So get in there, play around with it, check it out. Given Knowles Nelson's success, you might say, why the heck are we even talking about it tonight? Um, and that is because really there was a pivot that many of us are familiar with. When Scott Walker was elected in 2010, we really saw Wisconsin's bipartisan consensus on conservation start to fray. And so throughout the Walker years, funding for Knowles Nelson was progressively cut to the point where by I think it was 2022, Knowles Nelson expenditures were down by about 90% from their peak in 2007. So we've really kind of been on defense to try and keep the program alive, keep it working for Wisconsin. But kind of all of us together on this call and so many people around Wisconsin have really been doing their part to speak up and advocate for the program. So the first step in that was the governor's proposal. So Governor Evers proposed essentially tripling the funding for Knowles Nelson, which would fund it at about $100 million a year. Cassie gave us some context at the beginning of the call about kind of the overall scope of the state budget, which is about $60 billion. What the governor was proposing to do is spend $1 billion over a decade, which is not nothing, but it's certainly a small portion of the budget. And what that would do would get us back to more or less about 60% of the purchasing power that we had back in 2007, which was kind of the high water mark for the program. And Wisconsin voters, hands down, support that proposal. We work with our partners at the Nature Conservancy to do bipartisan polling on the program every couple of years. This year, it came back to say that 93% of Wisconsin voters want to see this program continue. That includes 80% of voters who identify as MAGA voters. So you're very conservative Republican voters. We see more than two-thirds support for that governor's $100 million proposal. So we all are in good company with friends all across Wisconsin advocating for this program. I have been so impressed this year with the work that the Sierra Club has done to get the message out, to call legislators. A whole bunch of Club folks came and joined our lobby day at the Capitol in March. And I've been trying to keep track of these. It's a little hard sometimes, but I think there have been at least 6 different lobby days at the Capitol, all of which have had Knowles Nelson stewardship as a top line ask for legislators. And we have tracked thousands and thousands of emails, phone calls, letters, postcards, visits, all going into the Capitol. So the work's not done, but we can all feel really good about the fact that like we're doing a heck of a job getting the message across, and doing so in a way that says this is something that we all should be able to agree on. Okay, so where are we at? Um, Up until last week, we were at a whole bunch of nothing, publicly at least. So Joint Finance had not taken any action on it. We hadn't heard anything specific from legislative leaders about a reauthorization proposal. And as Cassie mentioned, like the clock is ticking. Legislative leaders continue to insist that they're going to get the budget done by June 30th. I don't know if June 30th is on my bingo card, but they're saying it. So let's assume we're trying to work towards that deadline. There are some folks on the Republican side of the aisle that have been working really hard to try and figure out kind of how do we thread this needle between some kind of intransigent and pretty oppositional folks in leadership positions on the Republican side of the aisle, and on the other side here, Democrats who are pretty excited about renewing Knowles Nelson and Wisconsin voters that are over the moon about it. So Tony Kurtz and Pat Testin, who are the Republican vice chairs of the Finance Committee. Kurtz is the vice chair on the Assembly side. He's from the Elroy Sparta area. Testin is the vice chair on the Senate side. He's from the Stevens Point area. They introduced a piece of standalone legislation. So that means it's its own bill outside of the budget process that would make some policy changes to the stewardship program and then pave the way for a second piece of legislation, which is drafted as its own legislation that would fund the program. That would be the appropriations portion. It's really unclear at the moment whether that would be kind of folded into the DNR budget motion in joint finance, or if that would move along as a piece of standalone legislation as well. So compared to the governor's proposal, this standalone bill is not great. We're currently funded at about $33 million a year. This would actually reduce the funding to about $28 million a year. Most of those cuts are to the DNR's ability to acquire land. So nonprofits and local governments would remain able to continue doing their work. There's been a little bit of heartburn about the fact that it looked like Friends of State Parks groups would no longer be able to have grants under Knowles Nelson as part of this proposal. I have not seen revised language, but the bill authors have assured me that that was an oversight and a drafting error, and that they do intend to include those Friends grants. The bill would also do a couple of other things. It would add in a new component for nonprofits to be able to apply for grants to do land management. So to do seasonal burns or invasive species management, stream bank restoration, things like that. This is really important work. There hasn't been much meaningful state funding for that in the past. The governor had proposed kind of starting a whole new funding bucket for that. Unfortunately, what this proposal does is it kind of lumps it in with the same pot of money, and then it tells DNR to always prioritize land management over land acquisition. So unfortunately, I think that would have kind of the practical effect of strangling our ability to acquire more land in the future, because we're talking about such limited dollars. And if DNR always has to say the land management grants come first, I just think there wouldn't actually be much money coming around for acquisition. So that bill was introduced in the Assembly, and just yesterday, the Assembly Committee on Forestry, I think it's Forestry, Parks, and Outdoor Rec, they held what's called they held an open hearing or an informational hearing on the bill. So what does that mean? It means that Representative Kurtz came and he explained the bill to committee members, and then a number of groups came and spoke and shared their perspective on the bill. So I was there, gave testimony on behalf of Gathering Waters and Team Knowles Nelson. In total, there were 11 different groups that spoke, and that included land trusts, hook and bullet organizations like Ducks Unlimited, Trout Unlimited, Friends of Wisconsin State Parks was there. And generally, the way the testimony went was folks saying, we love the fact that there might be an opportunity for Republicans and Democrats to work together to reauthorize stewardship. We certainly wish the money was more, but we understand that it's a really challenging political climate. So let's keep Knowles Nelson alive. Let's at least keep as much funding as we can intact. And then we can always revisit this in the next budget when hopefully we have a different political landscape to better fund it. And then groups really gave kind of two pieces of feedback. One was let's not prioritize management over acquisition, at least put those on an equal footing so that these two priorities can continue to move forward together. And then two, there's a part of the bill that is kind of a mess, and they call it a major land acquisitions program, which is basically saying if you have a high dollar project like the Pelican River Forest, it would have to move through the legislature on its own as a standalone bill rather than just having money allocated through Knowles Nelson. We don't have time to go into all the details tonight. Essentially, that would recreate some of the worst of what we called kind of the pocket veto era, where a single anonymous legislator could block a worthy conservation project from moving forward. And I think that could happen under this proposal. And so nearly every group said, let's fix this. Now, going forward, the question is, okay, like what happens next? So, in order for a piece of legislation to move, it has to be approved out of committee on the Assembly, has to be heard and approved out of committee in the Senate, and then considered by the entire legislature and voted on. And then, of course, it has to be good enough to receive the governor's signature. What the bill authors have said is that that process is a precondition for then funding Knowles Nelson in the budget. Again, it's June 12th. They say that they're going to finish the budget by June 30th. As of today, we do not have any certainty that the Senate is even going to hold a hearing on the bill, and we don't have any certainty that that Assembly committee will vote it out of committee and to the floor. So what that means is there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty around Knowles Nelson. Okay, so what do we do about that? One is myself and other folks are spending a ton of time at the Capitol talking to legislators, trying to help keep this thing moving. Cassie, in a minute, is going to talk about how we can all keep sharing our voice and making sure that legislators are kind of hearing this drumbeat of support. And then for anybody who's not already on our email list, if you do Cassie's Take Action tonight, that will make sure you get our updates. And we'll do one of two things. If this standalone bill actually moves forward, we're all going to work together to do everything we can to make that as good as possible and make it a success. If it falls apart, as so many good things do in our state Senate right now, because they appear to be largely incapable of governing, then we will return to the Joint Finance Committee and say, look, we gave it a shot. Y'all are not getting it together to move this standalone legislation. We expect you to fund Knowles Nelson in the interim through the state budget process. So there's going to be kind of one of two pathways that are going to be really time sensitive. Cassie and company at Sierra Club are so good about turning around messages, spreading the word. But I just want to say, keep your phone on between now and the 4th of July, because we're all going to have to kind of shout this from the mountaintops to keep Knowles Nelson moving forward. So I know that's a lot of information right now, for the moment, I'll pass it over to Cassie, but then I would be happy to hang out and answer questions too. All right, Cassie, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to all of our speakers who covered so many moving pieces of the budget, including this very critical stewardship piece that is moving very fast. A couple of actions that we want to walk through. Today and tomorrow, we are hosting our state budget call-in days on all 4 of the issues that were covered in this webinar. I put the link in the chat earlier, and I will put it in here again. There was a question in the chat about why we picked just some legislators on the Joint Finance Committee rather than all 16. And a lot of it has to do with sort of who holds positions of power in the committees. So the 2 chairs of the committee and the 2 vice chairs, as well as one of the Democrats who not only is on the Joint Finance Committee, but she's also on the Forestry and Outdoor Recreation Committee. So those are some of the individuals that we put as a top priority to contact. Now, you are more than welcome to contact all 16 Joint Finance Committee members. You're more than welcome to contact all of the members on the committees that need to hear, especially the Senate committee that needs to hold a hearing on the Knowles-Nelson legislation. So you can contact more than who we say, but we wanted to make it doable for people with limited time. So those are just a couple of the folks that rose to the top of the list. So feel free to use that resource, make some calls. No one's going to be in their offices right now, so make a call tomorrow morning, put that in your calendar. The next thing I want to walk through is the Team Knowles-Nelson postcard tool. Team Knowles-Nelson, in addition to that beautiful map that we were looking at earlier, has really great interactive tools to help people advocate for this program. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'll share this link in the chat. So you'll go to Team Knowles-Nelson, and under the Take Action tab, you can navigate to the postcard section, and they make it really easy for you to create and send a personalized postcard about why you support this program. It'll walk through the steps that you need to do. So if you read the reminder emails about this webinar, you'll note that I said, think about and identify a picture that you might want to include of one of your favorite natural places in the state. Bonus points if you know for sure that it's Knowles-Nelson. If you don't know, you can check that cool map. So you're going to upload it. You can add your own message, and then Gathering Waters and Team Knowles-Nelson will mail those postcards for you. So you don't need to find a stamp or print it out on fancy paper. They'll take care of that for you. So I'll share this link in the chat now, so you can do this right now if you have your picture ready. Here's this link. And then, oh, perfect. Charlie put it in there as well. So you will go to fill this out. You'll start by adding your picture. So I found one here of me mushroom hunting. It'll upload. You share where that picture was taken. So this was at Indian Lake County Park in Dane County. And then you can customize the message. So there's pre-written text here that's helpful. You can adjust it as you want to. You'll click next. Fill out your contact information, and then click send my postcard. And that's your simple steps to get a postcard sent to the people who need to see it most at the key moments. And we're really thankful that Charlie and others on the team are watching so closely to know what those key moments are and who those key people are. So those are some of the actions that we're encouraging you to take tonight. Make your postcard and participate in the call-in days. And then if you want to do bonus work, you can submit a comment on the Joint Finance Committee website. You can contact all 16 Joint Finance Committees. You can contact your own legislator. I'll send all of the ways for you to do that in a follow-up email. But for now, I'm going to stop talking and see if anybody on the call has any questions. We have this scheduled until 7:15 and it's 7 o'clock, so we've got some time to answer questions. I know some people have to leave right at 7 o'clock, so thank you for joining if you have to hop off. But otherwise, we welcome everybody to stay on while you put together your postcard. We'll be here to help you troubleshoot if you have any issues, or yeah, I'll open it up now to any questions that people have. Don?
Yeah, I would just add a comment about Knowles Nelson. I think what's presented and what Gathering Water's been doing, and I love that website, knowlesnelson.org. So certainly do send in your own postcards. I think that's the best way to do it. But we've also made up some of our own postcards to make it simple for people elsewhere if they want to send in a postcard. We have a supply of those. And especially if you live in a Republican district, although any district is fine. We would encourage you if you know of other people who might not be willing to do their own photo or you want to encourage them, we'd be happy to send you, a supply of some postcards, one each for your state senator and state assembly person, to send in. So I'll put that information all in the chat, but I want people to be aware of that. It's an extra way you can help reach out to other people who aren't on this webinar and share this. I mean, again, first, if they're willing to make their own postcard, that's even best because it's their own picture and their own personal story. But if you want postcards to distribute to other people, we'd be happy to send them to you. This is an important effort here. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Don. We've got another question in the chat. Why is there such an unbalanced number of Republicans versus Democrats on joint finance? Charlie, I saw you come off mute.
Sure. Right, that's a really good question because there are 12 Republicans and 4 Dems on joint finance, and you might ask, like, didn't Democrats pick up a whole ton of seats in these last elections? And they did. The majorities are far closer, and this was a question I had to look into as well. Turns out there are no laws nor rules on the books about having legislative committees proportionally represent what each party has in the legislature. Instead, it's the prerogative of committee chairs, which essentially means it's the prerogative of the speaker in the assembly and the majority leader in the Senate. And so Robin Voss and Devin LeMahieu made the choice not to give Democratic legislators any more representation on legislative committees than they've had in the past. So you continue to see that really lopsided representation, even though the majorities are so much closer.
Yeah. Well, thanks for explaining how that's happening.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Oh, yeah. As Amy said earlier, we can't outshoot our problems. Another question came in. Does it make a difference when you call Joint Finance Committee members if you talk to an actual person or leave a message? Does anyone want to speak to this?
I can chime in on that too. The short answer is no. I think that, and let me just give that sort of in the caveat of, man, we are in such a tough political moment. It's so easy to feel like really cynical about, does any of this stuff matter? Is anybody actually listening? And interestingly, I've had multiple legislative offices tell me that they receive less communication from constituents than ever before, even though it's actually easier to reach out kind of than it's ever been. So that means that every single contact actually has more of an impact than you might think. If you have some kind of a relationship with a legislator or a staffer, by all means utilize that. Make the phone call, have the in-person meeting, go out for coffee. But beyond that, there's a couple things that really matter. The thing that matters more than anything is the number of contacts on which side of the issue. So if they hear from two people on an issue, they might shrug. If they hear from a dozen people on an issue, it's going to come up in their staff meeting and they're going to say, 12 people contacted us and they said yay or they said nay. And so voicemail, staffer, the legislator, an email, snail mail, carrier pigeon, it all works. So the most important thing is just make contact however you choose to do so.
Can I just follow up on that?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Okay, I was the one that posted the question, and I was I'm not one to really make the calls, and I was nervous about it. I actually did all five before the webinar, um, and I thought I heard someone say put it on your calendar to call tomorrow. When I called, I had two answers. I spoke with two people, and then I had answering machines for the other four, or the other one. So I mean, if someone is like me, or they're hesitant to call or talk with someone, if you call off hours and you can leave a message on the machine. That's kind of why I was asking, just give that perspective to someone like me who isn't really familiar with making the calls. um and so I just wanted to have that discussion, that you could call now or you can call at 10 o'clock.
Mhm.
If it doesn't matter, whether you talk to someone or leave a message, and you're a little squeamish about doing it. Thanks.
That's a great point. Yeah, and as Charlie said, it's better to make contact in whatever way you're able to. So, Chris, thanks for doing something that you were nervous about and that you felt was hard. It does make a difference, and all those calls do really add up. So, thank you, and anybody else who made calls. And I think for those who are nervous about making calls, making a call right after this is a great way to do that. I see a couple other hands. We'll hear from Eric and then we'll hear from Maureen.
Yeah, I just wondered if I think you said you're going to send out the contacts for making the calls like tomorrow or something, or
Yes, I put them the link to that in the chat. And Eric, since you're on the transportation team, you got this email from me a couple times today. But
okay.
yes, I'll resend all the links. As many as I can remember immediately after this, and then tomorrow I'll comb through the chat and catch any that I miss.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Thanks. Maureen?
So I made all those calls today and I sent you a note, Cassie, because I got a live person for everybody, their staff people that answer. Interestingly, the one Democrat, Representative Kahara, or I can't remember
And
the name.
Raka.
Yeah, thank you. That person was so, and then I called my own legislatures, which are from Madison. So they were all so engaged in the conversation with me. I understand we're on the same wavelength, but the other ones listened, but they made no comments and said they would pass that on. I made sure that I said um, that we appreciated that they had I was talking about Knowles Nelson basically. And I appreciated that they had a bill that to renew it, and I encouraged the bipartisanship. But I didn't get any like friendly response. Oh, that's good. So just be prepared for that when you call. They listen and they say they will pass it on. I'm assuming it gets passed on. I don't trust too much nowadays, but anyhow, that was my experience. But the Democratic people will just engage with you. So that's nice. So you could, do every other one so you feel better about the call.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing your experience, Maureen. And um, having talked to a lot of staffers personally, I do know they take their tally counting very seriously. So even if they're just listening to you or aren't super engaged, they do make sure that they get the tally in the right column so that it can be reported back. So yes, I think your message is getting through. Especially the fact that more than one person is calling on the same day. Don?
Yeah, in line with that, like Charlie mentioned, most of the Republicans are, actually, at least people out in the populace are very supportive of stewardship. And, I think even the legislators appreciate what they have in their district. I mean, you can always go out and ask either the staff person you're talking to or ask about the legislator. Well, do they get outdoors? Do they use these places? And if they mention a place, say, that say, oh, I love that place. We want more like that. That's why we're doing it. So there might be opportunities to connect with them on things when you might be surprised. I know another case, we were looking at some other sort of related bill, and there was a Republican legislator who was sponsoring it, and we actually connected a little bit. So you never know when, you can find angles where you can connect with something, because if they're in their district, they probably get outdoors and may appreciate some of those places too. So always opportunities to look for.
Excellent. We have time for one more question or comment. Does anyone else have anything to chime in?
I'll ask another question. I'm not again familiar necessarily with how Sierra Club, I don't know, separates categories or whatever, but I just wonder how air quality or clean air fit in with all of this. That's something that's been on my mind recently. So I just wondered. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up. Clean air overlaps a lot with our transportation sector. So that falls into some of what Emily talked about. And then our electric sector, there's not as much directly related to electric sector decisions in the state budget as some of these other topics. So things like closing coal plants, stopping new fossil gas plants, replacing them with renewable energy and energy efficiency. A lot of those things are not funded through the budget. And so we have a separate team that works on those decision makers. That's mostly the Public Service Commission is the name of that regulatory agency. But as I was just about to say, what Clint said in the chat, do you want to come off mute and add in that thought?
Yeah, sorry, I was just responding, but yeah, well managed forests, particularly working forests, are much less prone to wildfires. And as everybody certainly in Wisconsin, I know here in Minnesota where I live, the smoke has been horrendous this spring. Nothing near like I experienced in Alaska in the 90s, but well managed forests it can be a real tool in managing air quality, but they're also and related to wildfire, but they're also filters for air quality as well. So again, well-managed forests, which when I spoke earlier about the conservation easement side of it, which Knowles Nelson stewardship funds are critical for, that really does help because you're pushing sustainable forest management, which is good forest management.
Perfect. Glad I passed it to you to talk through that. Yes. Yeah, and Don commented that well-managed working forests are good for water too. Yeah, all these things are connected, right? So anytime that we sort of split them apart, it's hard to untangle the web. Everything's connected. So we have to work together to protect so many of these things. Thanks for your question, Chris. All right, well, we are at 7:16, so we're 1 minute after I said we'd be. So I'm gonna wrap up here. Just a couple of reminders. Check your email so you get all the links. I'll be sending some tonight and then the rest tomorrow, as well as a recording and a link to the PowerPoint. Please make your calls for call-in day. You can call tonight if you don't want to talk to a person. Call tomorrow if you do. And then send your Knowles Nelson postcard in, and we will be in touch very soon. Thank you so much. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks. Good night, folks.